Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews back in Washington on this second day of President Trump's state visit to the UK. Pomp and circumstance were outshone by politics and protests. The American partner in this special relationship was met on the streets of London with fierce resistance. On the day after Queen Elizabeth toasted the visiting American president at Buckingham Palace, the giant balloon depicting the U.S. president as a giant diaper-clad baby made its return near Parliament Square. It was previously flown during Trump's last arrival last July. Thousands of protesters also flooded the streets near Trafalgar Square for what was dubbed a carnival of resistance to him. But despite what was visible to everyone in the entire world, the president called the protests, the very fact of the protests, the reality of what you're looking at, as fake news.
And even coming over today, there were thousands of people cheering. And then I heard that there were protests. I said, where are the protests? I don't see any protests. I did see a small protest today when I came, very small. So a lot of it is fake news.
Well, appearing alongside British Prime Minister Theresa May, the president backed off his previous criticism of her handling the Brexit negotiations, instead offering some praise for the outgoing prime minister.
I think it will happen. And I believe the Prime Minister's brought it to a very good point where something will take place in the not-too-distant future.
I seem to remember the President suggested that I sued the European Union, which we didn't do. We went into negotiations and we came out with a good deal.
Yeah, that's not such a... I would have sued, but that's okay. I would have sued and settled, maybe, but you never know. She's probably a better negotiator than I am.
Wow, how charming that was. But the president also continued to take swipes at a local vocal critic, London Mayor Sadiq Khan. The president followed up on a pair of tweets he sent just before his arrival yesterday, calling the mayor of London a stone-cold loser.
Well, I think he's been a not very good mayor, from what I understand. He's done a poor job. Crime is up, a lot of problems. And I don't think he should be criticizing a representative of the United States that can do so much good for the United Kingdom. We talked about it before. He should be positive, not negative. He's a negative force, not a positive force.
For more, I'm joined by Jill Colvin, White House reporter for the Associated Press, Jason Johnson's politics editor for TheRoot.com, Charlie Sykes, editor-in-chief of the Bulwark, and from London, Bobby Ghosh, Bloomberg opinion editor and columnist. Bobby, thank you. You're smiling. I got to ask you the most obvious question on this planet. Why would Trump deny what is visible to the entire planet, the protests against him in the streets of London?
Well, he spent a lot of time on helicopters, I assume with blacked out windows, if he didn't see the protesters. And when he was on the road, his convoy was carefully managed to avoid the places where there were protests, because that would have snarled up all the traffic. So he can claim he didn't see them, but I find it hard to believe he didn't know. Surely somebody in his enormous entourage would have whispered in his ear. A president who spent so much time watching television cannot have avoided seeing those pictures on TV. You don't see what you don't see, what you don't want to see. I guess that's the most charitable view you can take.
Well, you're very charitable, Bobby, but you were the attitude you express is so clear, but thank you. I'm going to go to Jill, who's a straight reporter for the Associated Press. Your job is to report what happened. The Shah of Iran even knew there were protests against him. What's Trump up to here?
Yeah, look, the president, in addition to this being very carefully managed, the president really kept away from the protests as much as possible. The president is also surrounded by a lot of people who don't like to tell him no and don't like to tell him things he
don't look out the window.
Hear.
John McCain's out there.
And he
really
has an incredibly thin skin when it comes to protesters. It's something that really bothers him. And you heard him at the press conference even say today, I passed by these streets full of all these people and they were all cheering at me. No, they were people who were standing taking cell phone pictures of you because the president of the United States and a motorcade is driving through the city. But I honestly sometimes question whether the president does indeed thinks he sees people cheering him on.
Charlie, let me ask you about this whole thing. I've been looking at the pictures. I've been out there, of course, in Fresno with Pete Buttigieg, but I look at these really, top hat performance. The president's in white tie. Melania looks wonderful. She's dressed like a scene from the Ascot or something, and My Fair Lady. Everybody looks great. A big effort went into this. And then he messes all up. Why does he mess it up with, dumping on the mayor of London and ruining the nature of all the effort to make himself look like a world leader? He doesn't look like one when he does this stuff.
Well, it turns out that pettiness and narcissism don't mix well with diplomacy. Who knew? Donald Trump just cannot restrain himself. Obviously, he's been prepped to say, okay, don't violate protocol, don't say certain things. I mean, here's a guy that went on the Howard Stern show back in 1997 and joked about having sex with Princess Di. So you can imagine the people were, trying to handle him, make sure, don't joke, don't say anything. And yet he can't help it. He can't help lashing out. He cannot help making it all about himself. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go with Jason because I've been in black tie a few times in my life, about 4 or 5 times. It's always a big pain to get dressed like that. It really is for the gridiron or Al Smith dinner or something. And he gets through all and Melania looks fantastic. You go out and get this wardrobe that looks like out of a movie. All this effort to be seen with the Queen of England and the rest of the royal family. And then the whole storyline is fighting with the mayor. He didn't have to mention the name. Nobody knows who the mayor of London is. Why is he doing that?
Well, it's not just because he's petty, Chris, but it's that inherent discomfort and hostility that Trump had here, right? This idea that I made it, but there's still this blue blood group that doesn't accept me.
But they did.
But he only got elected. Not really. It's only because he's president. Meghan Markle still doesn't want to see him. He still feels like he's not.
Oh, you don't believe that she really is?
Oh, she just didn't want to see him. She didn't want to see him, and that's why he was hostile to it. And as an American citizen, that's actually the kind of person he should want to be seen with as much as anybody else. Because
she's American.
Yeah, she's an American. He should be excited about that.
Anyway, the president waded into British politics today more than this when asked about Conservative Tory contenders to succeed Theresa May as Prime Minister. Former Foreign Minister Boris Johnson and current Foreign Secretary, same title, Jeremy Hunt. Let's watch.
So I know Boris. I like him. I've liked him for a long time. I think he'd do a very good job. I know Jeremy. I think he'd do a very good job. I don't know Michael. But would he do a good job, Jeremy? Tell me.
Well, this thing about interfering, we'll get to this, but this idea of interfering in other people's politics. The Russians did it to us. He's very comfortable doing it to the Brits. A short time later, by the way, the president huddled with Brexit party leader, that's a separate party, Nigel Farage, at the U.S. ambassador's residence. But Boris Johnson declined a request to meet with the president so he could prepare for a campaign event. The two spoke by phone, however. Johnson is most internationally well-known of all the candidates to succeed May. He appeared here on Hardball back in 2015 when he was mayor of London, and we were glad to have him. Here he is, Boris Johnson, as mayor. Let me ask you about leadership today and the paucity, I think that's a good English word, of leaders. Of people like Thatcher was looked up to, Reagan was looked up to, Kennedy certainly was. It's getting pretty shallow out there for leaders.
But maybe that's a good thing, Mr. Matthew.
I'm listening, Chris.
Chris, forgive me. Maybe. What it shows is actually that in many of our countries, the world does not require the kind of critical leadership that Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan provided during the period when we had to face down the Russians in the Cold War. Doesn't require the kind of courage that Winston Churchill had to display during the absolutely existential moment in 1940. Maybe we live in a blander, softer kind of age.
Yeah. Bobby Ghosh, you're on the scene in London. It's late there. I want to ask you about the view of Trump. Is there such a thing as a British view, not left, not Jeremy Corbyn view, not the Labour Party view, but or the streets even? Is there a general view of Trump that's mixed, or is it just they don't like this Ghosh? I'm sorry for using that word.
I think they like me.
This ugly American, if you will. I'm not sure that's true, but is that the way they look at him, as the ugly American or not?
Well, he is the most unpopular American president since polling began, I think. Those are the numbers I saw today, and that cuts across the board. Unlike the U.S., in the U.K., it cuts across the political divide. It was not just Jeremy Corbyn who skipped the dinner last night and who spoke at the opposition, at the anti-Trump rally today. Plenty of other politicians across the spectrum in this country didn't want to be seen anywhere near Donald Trump, didn't want a photo op. And the fact that a man who aspires to be prime minister, that's Jeremy Corbyn, chose to speak at an anti-Trump rally tells you that he made a political calculation, right or wrong. He made a political calculation that speaking up against the American president, against the president of this country's most important ally, he figured that that would be a smart political move for him to make.
I think Boris wants to be prime minister. I think Boris Johnson has sort of that Churchillian aspect of being a man in the wilderness and coming back. I've got very mixed feelings about the guy. Let me go to Charlie on this question. It really has bugged me since the day Trump arrived in Washington. He was elected in the Electoral College. We all accept that. He was elected in the Electoral College. He got the 270 he needed. And he's here. He's our president. No doubt about it. We don't call him current president. He's president of the United States. But his family wasn't elected. This Romanovs thing of his, it's ridiculous. He hauled over all his kids, even Tiffany, for this occasion. He acts like somehow the family is royal. He's confused. He also likes autocrats like Putin. And he loves tough guys like Netanyahu. And he likes tough guys like the worst kind, like Kim Jong-un. Yeah. And he also likes monarchs. This is the second week in a row he's been visiting with emperors, and now he's meeting with the Queen of England. What does he think he is? That he brings his family with him like a royal?
Well, this is the dangerous thing about these trips for Donald Trump. When he went to France, remember, he came back with the idea for the big military parade, and you wonder whether he's going to come back from London and thinking, you know, this royal family thing, you know, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the Trump family is a Trump family business, sort of like the Windsors, right? Why not? In fact, you're already starting to see some of his supporters say, well, you know, he is American royalty. Look, just because he likes golden toilets doesn't make him Louis XIV. But clearly, he's smitten by these trappings of authoritarian power and of royalty. So I think that, you know, it was Donald Trump basically saying, look, you know, this is my family. I'm going to show the British royal family, you know, what the American royal family looks like. Let
me go to John. That's your thoughts. As a straight reporter again, the President of the United States is head of state. A woman would be head of state, too. This is the way it works. You're elected to head of state. You're not elected king.
It is highly, highly unusual. This is a display that we have not seen from other presidents. The fact that not only the children who are advisors, the child of the son-in-law who work in the White House as senior advisor.
Politics.
He's not. He's also bringing along his sons, Eric and Don Jr. Don Jr. has his own political aspirations. But these are people who run the president's business, who are profiting from the Trump name. And to bring them along, to let them use the social media images of it, I mean, just adds more and more questions about all of the ethical issues.
Well, the Republican Party is called the Republican Party, lowercase.
Yes.
They believe in a republic, not a monarchy.
Yes.
When is somebody going to raise their hand and say, I'm not going to kiss the butt again of one of your family members?
I mean,
I'm not going to do it. Yet he insists that they do it.
Amash might be the only person who's talking about impeachment. But most of these guys, look, I mean, he is a walking emoluments clause violation. The amount of money that we spend.
By the way, I went by the hotel the other day thinking about it. I'm sure it's on his mind all the time.
Exactly.
How much cash is coming through the door on that hotel?
And when his children get to go with him, his children who run his businesses, this is not Sasha Malia. These aren't kids that are like, hey, you can see this is the first time. They can fly there on their own. They can make these kinds of trips on their own. This is the American people paying for vacations and business opportunities for his family. This is being seen all over the world by other people that Trump's children want to do business negotiations with. That's the problem.
So if you're the king of Jordan, or you're from Saudi Arabia, or you're from the Emirates, or you're from Israel, you've got to deal with Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, as if he's what, a viceroy?
Basically, or the hand of the king. I mean, that's pretty much how the president likes to play this. And by giving this kind of high-profile position and these kinds of opportunities to his kids, he is setting himself up to have power beyond this president.
I have a theory about Trump, and I think he's playing all the cards of the presidency. And one card he's playing of incumbency is this: I can meet with heads of state, not like prime ministers and people like that. No, I can meet with the Emperor of Japan. I can meet with the Queen of England. I can prance around as if I'm one of those royals, and maybe that'll intimidate people into voting for me again next year because I'm so big. Anyway, Jill Colvin, thank you for your straight reporting. Jason, for your strength. Charlie Sykes from the world out there and the American people. And Bobby Ghosh, you are not Ghosh, sir. You are a great gentleman. And thank you for coming on to give us the street feel out there in London town. Anyway, the House is our House is set to begin hearings on the Mueller report, but they're being very careful